really something. Nothing? Wow, I'm sorry, guys. What a bummer. It just went from bad. Yeah, that's such a bummer. It's like, how did it go from? Oh, no.
You speaking to the microphone?
Yep, I'm speaking. Let's use your computer. Sorry, guys. Thank you. Thank you. I think we'll be okay. Okay, that sounds good. I went from like worse to bad. Okay. Stephen, do you want to start the prayer while I just do this last bit? Why don't we do that? I want you to sit in a meditative position. We're going to do a 5-minute sit. You're going to hear a bell and then 3 bells at the end of the 5 minutes. And the goal is to simply relax. I want you to identify areas in your body, in your mind, mind and speech. So speech is also the discursive thoughts or the and use and identify if there is chit chat going on, and then you're going to use your exhales of your breath to release the chit chat fully. And then you're going to go to your mind of what else is occupying the space of your mind. Usually it has to do with visuals of past, present, or future. Bring it back to, or usually past or future, not so much present. So bring it back to the present and release everything that has nothing to do with relaxation. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. See you in 5 minutes. How was that? Did it feel long? Did it feel short? It felt short. Okay. Were you able to fully release and relax? No. Were there certain things that were coming up? Was it body, speech, or mind? Mind. Things that were like things that you need to do, or feelings, or emotions, or ideas, or, okay. Anyone else? Is there speech with anyone else?
Speech kept overwriting. Like it kept being like when I was remembering that I was off my object, speech would come in.
The narrator.
Like, oh, this is your object now. Move
Yeah.
here.
The narrator came back.
Yeah.
She's like, hello.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone with body? Body issues?
Yeah, just lingering cold.
Like not feeling well. Great. Okay, good. Okay. We're going to do it one more time. Okay. So now you know that there's something that has been occupying your space, whatever it may be, mind, body, or speech. Mind, body, speech, right? So what I want you to do is, now that you know that there's something that's lingering, whatever that may be for you, your goal of the meditation is to let it go. Okay. It's not stopping it. You just relax and you release it and you just let it go. Oh, you're just exhausted. But that's also a state of mind where you're like, I'm so tired, I'm so exhausted, you know? So you just, all that like, that the emotions of that exhaustion, you know, because you can be exhausted from, I have so much, I mean, living in New York every day is exhausting, like walking, like breathing, it just sometimes feels a lot, you know, exhaustion. If you have children, like, I don't know how you guys do it, like ever, you know, that has a level. So there is that kind of, that exhaustion is also in the mind, but it's also in the body, where you can feel it in different parts of your body. So you're just letting it all relax. So you're completely just at ease. You just let it wash away. There is no forcing of it though. It's not like you're grunting to let it go. It's not like that, or you're pushed. It shouldn't feel like a push. It's just it's a full surrender that you're feeling. And you start to feel in your body, and you feel it in your mind, and you feel it with your speech of the mind. Okay, does that make sense? And I just want you to be still and observe what it must feel like to be completely, totally free of all those various, really for most of us, it's usually afflictions that permeate our body and our mind. Okay, so one more time. So now you know what you need to, like what you're up against. Okay, here we go. How was that? Better? Better. For most of you, better. Yeah, it felt better. Felt like I wanted it to be longer. It's like I'm in the groove. Why was it better? How did it feel better?
So actually, it will bring my mind back.
Instead of just letting it go and being like,
The first one I just was like,
whatever. Yeah. But now you're like, oh wait. Yeah. Okay, great. What else? What else made it better?
I just have a question. Is that because we took a break and identified the thing to work on?
I think it helps to do that because usually in your own sit, if you do a longer sit, it takes a while where you're like, oh man, what was I? Oh, and it's harder to identify. And I've been thinking about this a lot of like, how am I going to get you guys to meditate? and, and I was thinking about like, I wonder if we just stopped it early on when you have discursive thought and we can identify it, kind of just be like, I got you. I know that this is it. Like for me, it was, calls I've had today and things I'm having to do tomorrow, whatever. Right. And I know that that's kind of what's taken a majority of my space. If we can identify what that is, or if it's a physical thing, or it's a, whatever it may be, and you can kind of capture it and then take it and know that that's what it is and then release it, is that an easier way to kind of get into it much quicker? Yeah. So I wonder if it's an interesting way to look at it. I mean, this is what meditation really is. I mean, it gets really interesting and exciting actually when you can, not when you're like sitting and being like, okay, I have to sit here for like 15 minutes and think about nothing. I mean, that's so hard. It makes it more interesting when, at least for me, when I can be like, I know what I need to think about. Like I have had, there's sometimes things that happen in my life, and and I can go to my therapist and have a session about it, or go to my partner and like really just bitch about it, or sit with myself and brew. But really what I will do if it's something that's like I can't figure it out, I felt something and I don't know what it is, and it's something that I'll take it to the cushion. And usually those are some of my best meditations because I know I have a very specific focus of like, I got to figure this something out and I don't know what it is. And it motivates me more. So I think sometimes if you have a specific topic, but especially before you even meditate, if you have to release and you can't relax fully and you're occupying yourself with actually engaging in a lot of thoughts, if you can identify what it is and you know what that is and then fully let it go. I think it's a cleaner way to practice. It's shorter sprints though. So I'd be curious to see if you did like a 5 minute at home, sit and just be like, okay, I'm going to relax. And you see what happens when you're trying, and you take a break and you can write down like, okay, these are the things that really happen. Like I'm feeling cold. My knees are feeling a little wonky, or I'm occupying myself with all this annoying stuff that's been happening today, or things I have to deal with tomorrow, or whatever it is, right? You know what that is. And then you go back on your cushion and you sit and you say, okay, I'm going to now do a 7 minute sit. I did 5 minutes of that. I'm going to do 7 minutes and try to keep it as pure and clean. Because the goal isn't to think about nothing. You're actually just learning to breathe. You're feeling your body to breathe. For some of you that were able to go deeper on the second sit, which wasn't even that long, you might feel a sense of, you can hear the ringing in your ears. Do you hear that sometimes? There's like you feel the ringing, the vibrations of the city that you're in. You'll hear like a ringing in your ears. And you're like, oh, that's what happens? Oh, what's that? Or sometimes when you get to really start to release, your body will start to have like a tingling sensation that will happen sometimes, where you're like, oh, that's weird. That feels, and you actually feel like you're completely very clear and alert and actually thinking about nothing except just being present in your body. And you're completely aware. You can hear someone's phone vibrated and the siren, and there's people walking. All of it's there, but you're clearly acutely aware that you're thinking about your breath, releasing and just relaxing. It doesn't mean you're not thinking about anything. That's insane. Like, of course you're conscious, so you're thinking about something, but the whole focus is to just be and relax. And with that, there are sensations that you will start to feel in your body, and you will start to hear things, and you will have a certain type of clarity that starts to come about. And so it's interesting if you can start to identify and watch that, because when it gets juicy, when you're in the flow of it, you will know that you're in it, and you'll want more of it. And it's probably one of the most, I mean, really, when you can do it well and you can do it quickly, it's probably one of the most addictive things, because it's easy to actually, I mean, you can even, I would even say that it's almost dangerous in the sense that you could actually go to refuge for that. And it's much deeper than that. That's just the precursor to then going deeper. But, you know, like when people are like, I just need to meditate. It's like, no, you're not, it's not escapism. That's not what you're doing, but it does feel really good. It just suddenly feels like you're just, you're free of so much of all the baggage, but you're still in your body. So you're not anyone, you're not being anyone else. You're being completely you, but you're like, this is what it must feel like to not have that weight and those afflictions and that exhausting like memory or the things, the obligations that you have, and like the, you know, that like that goes away, and you're like, this is what it must feel like to be you in the, you know, without all the afflictions. That's awesome. So you'll get a sense of that. So that's what you want to be able to tap into before you even do your meditation sit. Because with all that clutter, there's no room for you to meditate on anything else. You have too much stuff going on. You have to purge, right? So that's what I want you to focus on this week. Like, what does it feel like to be in your body? Where are you breathing from? Are you, and you can even make observations while you're doing it. You don't have to be like, I can't think about nothing. You know, it can be like, oh, my breath is a little shorter. That's interesting. A little bit more shallow, or feels like it's getting a little deep, or am I getting warmer? You know, is it cooling me? Like you just make these observations. You don't attach a narrative to it. You can just make those notes and be completely conscious and aware and present. So that's what you're doing. You're just starting to gauge, like, that's what it feels like. Okay. And you should note those things, that you're able to even do that and have the ability to do that. And hear noises, but not even get distracted by it. You're like, oh, I heard that. That's, you know, but that's irrelevant to what your focus is, right? I mean, you guys do this every day. You know that, right? You do it all the time, every day. Every time you sign on and watch another episode of whatever you're watching. Huh? Yeah. Yeah. Right. Game of Thrones. You know, you're completely able to be very focused on your topic of what you're watching it, and whatever is happening. Those something bother you, right? So you're trained in it. You just have to retrain it with actually knowing how to be in your body and in your mind. Okay. So today, what we're going to talk about, I saw this, it's not a quote. I'm reading right now. I'm reading currently the Tibetan book of Living and Dying. If none of you have read it, it's a fantastic book. And Sogyal Rinpoche is a teacher of one of my teachers that I study with. And it's nice to just hear him write. And I don't know, it's always nice to see like teachers of teachers. Anyway, the reading that I was today, he was talking about meditation, which I thought was just wonderful. And this is something that I saw that I underlined that I wanted to share with you, where he says there's a connection between the posture of the body and the attitude of the mind. Mind and body are interrelated, and the meditation arises naturally once your posture and attitude are inspired. So today, it's class 3. Today's course 3, but it's class 4. That's wrong, that's a typo. And we're going to talk about the 8 postures, the 8-point posture. Okay, can you say chu, gi, lu, chu? Again, chu, gi, lu, chu. So chu means dharma, gi is 8, lu is body, and you know what? That's not true. Chu is posture, gi is 8, lu is body, chu is posture. So it's the 8, it's technically the 8-point posture. Sometimes in meditation, you'll hear it as people talk about the 7-point posture. Have you guys heard of that before? Okay. Sometimes you'll hear 7-point. It's mostly common used as a 7-point. In the text that we're going to be using with the commentaries of Jason Klapa, he's talking about it as a 8-point posture. And the 8th point that he talks about in this scripture in particular is the breath. So he adds in the breath as a point. But you will often hear it as 7-point, and they won't include the breath. And in those, wherever they're getting their information, usually that is because the breath is actually a separate part. It's still a part of the postures, but they don't include it as the 7 points. So that's where you'll hear it. Okay, here you go, 8-point body posture. Can you say Kangpa? Kiltrung. Again, Kangpa, Kiltrung. So this is it's really the body posture of the legs. So we talked about legs, I think on the first day. And it's really what to do with the legs. So the Buddha has the left foot usually up, right? And then the right that goes on top. And that's full lotus. So whenever you see that, that's what you call full lotus. That is, yeah, I guess it would be considered like the ideal posture to sit in. If your hips are not open and your knees are janky, don't do it. Like you're gonna ruin yourself and it's not worth it. And it doesn't need to be that way. I would also recommend, if you can do full lotus, alternate use your common sense. I mean, really, like alternate your legs so that you're not just having one leg be a certain tightness and the other one's not. Another option that you have is called half lotus, where you put one foot up and that's all. And like that, if that's comfortable for you, do that. I also recommend rotating it as well. I mean, this is just also me coming from like being a yogi, and it makes no sense just to do one side and not the other. So rotate it if you can. If the half lotus is not working for you, no problem. You can sit where you have actually two, it's like you're still so you're always in this tripod kind of stance, right? So it's to be able to stabilize you. The main goal is to make sure that your knees are touching the ground. If they're not touching the ground, put something underneath your knees to make it so that you can, because you want to ground yourself. You don't want to be in a place where you're unstable. It also is a combination of how high does your seat go up. So there are different cushions that you can use that you can stack. Some people even use blocks. That works. But the main point is that you want some sort of structure where your seat is elevated above your knees are grounded, and there's a triangle pose. So you can have it be, one foot in front of the other. The more you sit, the more comfortable it will become. Yoga was designed so that you can actually sit longer. So if you have a yoga practice, great. If you don't, maybe you might want to consider. But really, that's what it is. It's the legs are usually traditionally in a full lotus. You can also do a half. You can do a modification where your legs are on the ground. I wouldn't recommend sitting in like I could sit cross-legged and still my knees come down. But if you're sitting in a cross-legged, just make sure your knees are down. When you're sitting, if I sit down, you'll start to see my knees pop up immediately, right? And what also happens is that when your sacrum is lower, you slump. So it also helps with making sure that you're sitting upright and that you're able to stack your vertebrae on top of each other. Now, if sitting is difficult for you, because there are people that have issues with their back and their hamstrings and their hips and their knees, another option that we talked about is putting a cushion in between your thighs and sitting like this, totally doable and fine. The main point is so that your body's out of the way. If you're physically in pain and you're trying to meditate, guess what you'll be meditating about? Your pain. That's like, don't do that to yourself. That's not the point. The point is to get the body out of the way. So this is another great option that works. You can also sit in a chair. That's perfectly fine. And also lying down. Last class, we did supine pose, where you can lie down in Shavasana pose and sit and do a meditation that way. And I meditate laying down all the time. So it's not any, when I first learned it, a teacher of mine was teaching and he's like, I have this great meditation for you. And I said, great, let's do it. And he goes, lie down. And I got really offended because I thought it was for beginners. And I was like, this is for beginners. I'm advanced. I can, and he's like, just lie down. And it's been one of the best ways to practice as well for me. So it's up to you what works for you, but that's what that is. Any questions about the legs? I have a friend of mine who talked about how having your knees covered with a fabric or a blanket, just keeping it warm, has helped with her circulation, with being able to not have your knees ache. So that's another thing. I have also, just for any of you who have knee issues, I also know people who will put like a small towel, they'll roll it up and put it underneath in between their knees and their joint. And it just puts a little padding and it helps with your knees not getting so achy. And he'll usually do it with his bad knee. So those are kind of some tricks to think about, okay? Okay. Number 2, can you say meek, miye, misum? Again, meek, miye, misum. And this is something to do with the eyes. It's that your eyes are not supposed to be too wide open, nor, yeah, it's basically that your eyes are not to be too wide open too wide. So, okay, the eyes. So it depends on what tradition you're coming from. With our tradition, you start with, whether your eyes are open or closed, your gaze is actually about 45 degrees and about 6 inches away from you. It's around here is where you kind of focus. My teacher once said when he started learning, he thought it was like focusing on his nose, so he'd just become cross-eyed. You don't have to be cross-eyed. In fact, I don't recommend it. Your gaze is loose. It's not a sharp focus. It's usually around here. And so it feels like it's around where your nose is, but it's a little more of a distance out. So I would just kind of see where your gaze is. Your eyes can be either closed or open. If they are distracting to have it be open, close your eyes. If it makes you drowsy, you can open them up slightly, but it's not a full open. It's a very soft open and slightly. It's just a little bit of light coming through. Okay. Generally, if you do meditate with your eyes slightly open, it's helpful to make sure that whatever's in front of you isn't too distracting. Sometimes teachers will recommend that it's better even to meditate so that there's a solid fabric, something with not too many prints that are in front of you. If you have an altar, traditionally, like if you see this altar here, there's a fabric on the bottom so that when you're sitting, if you're at the altar, you would see fabric and you wouldn't be seeing all of your bowls and all the accoutrement that goes on top of it. Or just even at a blank wall, just to have something with very little going on is helpful. Okay. If you meditate early in the evening, or early in the morning or late at night when it's dark out, that's also kind of nice because you can have some light if you do have a little bit, like a candle or anything like that. But that's kind of nice because it's like it's a very soft focus that you want to have. So nothing that you can really see, so that you don't get distracted with seeing stuff and you know, like I'll have things where I'll like meditate and be looking at my altar, and I'll look at my bowls and just be like, oh, that bowl's dirty. Clean, you know, and it becomes that kind of thing. So you don't want that. Okay, great. Number 3, can you say Lu Drangpo? Again, Lu Drangpo. So this is about having your body straight. You want your body in a plane so that it's straight. You're not leaning forward, which I've mentioned to you that sometimes I have the tendency of doing, and you're not leaning back, which would be very difficult to do. You want your body to be upright and straight. When you're meditating and you notice that your body is doing funny stuff and you're slouching, make the modification. Something nice that I was reading in Sogyal Rinpoche's book when he was talking about sitting is that you're trying to physically emanate and radiate the confidence that you have in your mind that it's possible for you to reach your potential. And that's how he talked about it, which I thought was a really beautiful way to think of it. Because there is, to some degree, I think some kind of conviction you have to have. It may not be strong, but some sort of hope that you have, that you believe it's possible for you to reach your potential, whatever that may mean to you. And so when you think about that mindset of like, yeah, it is possible. Like, I do think it's doable. I may not be there, but I know that it's possible. That confidence that you have that it may be possible is what your physical body is supposed to manifest. It's that essence of, yeah, I know it's doable. And this is how I'm going to sit to show this idea that it's doable. So there is this upright posture that is inspired by what you are believing in, that it is doable, that you can actually be the best version of yourself. Does that make sense? So when you sit upright. There is no slouching, and it doesn't help with your breathing. It's not a stiff type of sit where it's not militant, but it is disciplined. So watch your structure, watch the structure of your body, because it's your reflection of how you think about what you're doing and if it's doable or not. Does that make sense? Yeah. Like, how many times have you guys seen, and it's very rare, but you'll see someone walking down the street and they have like really good posture, and you're like, wow, that I've heard, like, you know, like I would, like, sometimes I'll see women, not so much men, sometimes, but usually it's women that I'll watch, like their shoulders are back and they're walking and they have such great, and you're thinking, that's impeccable. And you notice it, right? It's astounding. You're like, wow, I wish I could be a little like that, you know? And so that's what you're trying to really think about. Is like, there's a confidence that comes in with that. So you're doing it in an outer body way as well as an inner. Okay, it's an outer and inner method. Okay, so that's the body. So please pay attention to that. Shoulders level, can we say trakpa? Nyam. Again, trakpa, nyam. So this is about your shoulders. You don't, obviously you're like, relax. It's just relaxation. It's relaxing your shoulders, knowing where they go, putting them at really just setting them to the back side of your shoulder blades, so you're not hunched over. Another thing to watch is your arms, and you'll get to feel the subtleties of it. Some of you that have longer arms, it may come out further, but watch where your arms go, because sometimes, people think that your hands have to go on your knees. And if they do, like for me, if I go on my knees, I will hunch. That's just, I have to reach for it. So for me to sit like this is not it doesn't make sense. So for me, actually, to bring my hands back further and tuck my elbows in gives me better posture, and my hands tend to be in the middle of my thighs. And that's where they go, and that's where it feels good. The minute I start going like this, my structure goes like that. Okay? So everyone has you have your own space of what that works, or what works for you. And you'll realize it too if you do longer sits. Like towards the end, you're like, like, it's not what you want. You want to be sitting upright. So your shoulders are a nice indicator of really your where your hands are also at and whether it's the right place. Next one, can you say go?
Go.
Mito,
Mito.
mima. Again, go, mito,
Mito.
mima.
Mima.
This is your head. So it's where your head should be. So it's not too down, right? And it's not too up. It's right in the middle. And what middle seems to you may not be what really middle is. The more you become in tune with your body, you'll get a better sense of what that looks like. And it's also good to just get a gauge of where your head generally tends to go and see if that makes a difference in your meditation. And I mean that seriously. And we'll talk about actually different things you do with your head and your eyes when you have a sense of dullness or a sense of agitation in meditation. But take a look and see where your head starts, you know. And if certain moods or certain meditations or certain types of meditations changes where your head plays, like what it looks like. But it's really just to make sure that your head isn't too bent down. That will make you more sleepy. Okay. And so just keep an eye on that and just level your posture. I know it reminds me a little bit of, like back in what is it, like when you think back, like in the 70s and 80s, how they would think about like the best posture of standing was when you put a book on your head and you'd walk. It reminds me of that. It doesn't need to be so particular. You want to make sure that you're relaxed, but you do want to make sure that you're upholding the proper posture. Okay, so the head, not too high and not too low. Number 6. Can you say sochu? Wrong look. Sochu, wrong look. And this is your natural position for your teeth and your lips. So most important, do not have your jaws too tight. A lot of us hold a lot of our anxiety, in our stress in our jaws. So relax your jaws always. When I lead meditation, I always start kind of with relaxing your brows, right? Relaxing your jaws, relaxing your shoulders. Another thing that we talked about in the first class, I'll go into a little bit more, is where is your tongue supposed to be? And so you want your tongue to be above on the roof of your mouth, behind your teeth. Okay, so just kind of test that out and see what that feels like. Right? And when you do that, I don't know, I guess it's just my habit. My lips tend to kind of open slightly. There's a little air that comes in, right? So that's where you want your tongue to be naturally placed, gently placed. You don't have to like stick it up there, but it's behind the roof or behind your teeth on the roof of your mouth. Does that make sense? And see how that helps you. And that's to help you for your saliva so that you're not gulping. Because once you start to sit, I mean, how many times have you sat in a meditation or even by yourself and you hear someone swallowing? It sounds loud, right? It gets loud. And then when it's your own, it gets pretty loud. So you want to be able to remove that distraction. So that's what you do with your tongue to help with that. And here, well, I'll go into breath actually at the end. Okay. Number 7, can we say che yaso?
Che yaso.
Wrong look.
Wrong look.
Again, che yaso.
Che yaso.
Wrong look.
Wrong look.
I'm sorry, you know what? Number 6 was the teeth, meaning you keep your teeth slightly open, your mouth slightly open, so that you can have a little air coming in. And number 7 is the tongue. So number 6 is really the teeth. It's about making sure your jaws aren't clenched, right? Your jaws are relaxed and your lips are slightly open. That's what number 6 is. And number 7 is where your tongue needs to be. And number 8, can you say ook? Again, ook. Okay, and that's the breath. So the breath is one of the most important parts of your meditation practice. The first and foremost is that you breathe out of your what? Nose, not your mouth, right? So unless you have some sort of condition where you can't breathe out of your nose, you're going to breathe out of your nose. And in Tibetan Buddhist tradition, when we think about one cycle of breath, it starts with the exhale first and then the inhale. Traditionally, you think about like one cycle of breath, you go inhale, exhale, right? In Tibetan Buddhism, it's the other way around. So if someone says 10 breaths, 10 cycles of breath, it's the exhale, inhale, that's 1. Exhale, inhale, that's 2. So you always start with the exhale first and then the inhale. And there's a reason for that I'm not going into today, but there is actually a significance to that, okay, to that philosophy and practice. Another thing that, you know, as we start doing more meditations, we're going to start doing more shamatha meditations. So the relaxation part of the meditation that we did earlier today and what we did last session is really a precursor to start practicing what a shamatha meditation will start to feel like. And we talked about shamatha on the first course as a type of meditation. And you use your breath to be able to move your thoughts and release your thoughts. And if you recall, last time I said, watch and pay close attention to the exhalation of your breath at the very tip of it and see what happens, okay? And so you'll start to see how your thoughts ride on your breath. You'll be able to start using your breath as a tool to facilitate releasing and relaxation, and also as a way to be able to move you through your shamatha meditation. So we'll talk more about that, but it's incredibly important to start paying attention to how you're breathing and if you're actually breathing and understanding what that means for you. The thing about breath is that you'll realize when you start to first meditate, your breaths are usually a bit longer. As you start to get deeper into your meditations, your breath gets shorter because they actually become distracting. So, and when you get deeper, they get much shorter, they get shallow, but it's not like that. They're just very slow inhales and exhales. And there's something about the breath that happens where it almost feels like the breath is like, the way Geshe Michael talks about it, he says it's like putty. And the way that I think about it is almost like, I don't know what movie it was, but there was like a sci-fi movie somewhere that I remember. Maybe it was like the Terminator or something. But the breath almost feels like it does have a quality like putty or like oil or like some sort of consistency where it's almost like when you breathe now, it's like you inhale oxygen, you exhale oxygen, right? When you get deeper into meditations, your breath becomes something where it almost feels like you're breathing in air and out air, but it only goes this far before it comes back in. Does that make sense? It feels like it has context. Like if I were to tag where my exhale breath, if I were to exhale and it was visualized in some sort of oil-like substance, right? And I was to flag it with something, I could actually flag it going back in and back out. It's almost like you're reusing your air again. It doesn't feel like I'm taking oxygen from out there. It almost feels like I'm just pulsating right within here and I'm reusing the air again. It's a very interesting process and an experience, and you'll get a sense of it the more you meditate. But there's something about the air quality and air and breathing that changes. And I am very, very intrigued to hear and see what you guys learn on your own practice. The breath is not something that needs to be forced out, nor should it be. And I keep saying that, but sometimes I think like when I take inhales and exhales and I breathe out, I want to completely take out all the stale air out of my body, and I'm forcing it out. It's not like that. And when you hear meditators, it's different than, let's say, being in yoga. It's not an ujjayi breath. You're not hearing the breath. It's quiet, but you're using it as a way to ride and start to move your meditations when you're doing a shamatha meditation. Yeah? Does that make sense? Any questions there? Yes.
Are you meant to breathe more from the diaphragm or from the chest?
That's a good question. Yeah, you should breathe from deep down in here. Yeah, it's not a diaphragm breathing, because if you notice a diaphragm breathing, it becomes shallow, and that can be distracting. And it could also make you lightheaded. So the breath does feel like it comes from here, but at some point, while you start to breathe, you'll realize that the breath, at least for me in my experience, it has been, I start my meditation where I'm breathing and I'm inhaling, exhaling, and trying to just take it easy and not force my breath. But at some point, it does really feel like your body is breathing. Like you feel it's almost your cells are breathing. So it doesn't feel like the breath comes from here so much. It just feels like my body is pulsating. Does that make sense? It's a very interesting, it's like, oh, I'm breathing. And because before I think about breath, and I always think breath is always in my nose. So I'm always paying attention to air moving in and out of my nose. And that's how I was taught originally about breath being out of this part of my anatomy or my body. But the more for me, at least in my process while I've been practicing, is that the more I focus on this, it becomes about like air going in and out of my nostril. And it hasn't been more of that. It's been more of actually watching and feeling the sensation of my cells breathing and moving. And I find that I actually get more out of that than focusing on just air coming in and out of my nostrils. I do think that at some point you can get so subtle where you can actually feel breath and air moving out of your nose. Like you can feel it in your hair, the hairs of your nose. But I find that it's easier for me to get there once I can feel my body breathing. Like I need to get a sense of grounding myself, what's going on, and feeling the weird tingles that are happening in different places and my body readjusting. And so it does start from the base, but it does feel like it moves to more of a, like my whole body being an entity of breathing rather than just like my respiratory system or my stomach. Yeah. Does that make sense? Does that help? Okay. Any other questions or comments anyone has? Yes.
Like my only experience was in the retreat once where I was like, I felt like my breath was going to stop.
Yeah.
And then it was kind of a little scary.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of meditators, and especially the more advanced you get, they will stop breathing. Yeah, you just take in less breath. I mean, my teacher actually, he did this, I don't know what the number is, but he started counting how many breaths he has per minute when he's in deep meditation. And it was very little. I was like, wow, it's amazing. I couldn't even, and I mean, I feel like if I try to do that, I'd start to control my breath instead of keeping it natural. But he was trying to correlate, I mean, he's just that way, but he was correlating and seeing how many breaths when he, on a normal day, like when he walks around, does his thing, versus when he's in deep meditation, how many breaths is he taking? And it does become less. You do actually, your body actually needs less air. Yeah. And that's why you'll hear stories sometimes of like yogis or monks who like stop breathing for a period of time because they just don't need the air.
Yeah, they talk about it in the yoga
sutras. Yeah. So that's normal. Yeah, and it does happen. You'll kind of, and sometimes you won't even realize that you've not been breathing that much. If you're in a certain meditative state, there, at least for me, I've come out and like, oh, have I been breathing? Like I feel like I stopped for a couple of seconds there. That's strange. Yeah, that will happen. And it's nice to take a note of that and watch that. But, the thing about this meditation practice, guys, is that it's discovering you, it's not like a practice out there. Does that make sense? It's not like it's this idea that's out there that's going to save you or make your life better. It's really about like you getting to know you more. I mean, that's really what you're doing. You're getting a better sense of understanding, like who is this person in this body, and what does this body even feel like? To why do I have these emotions that keep coming up that are like really screwing me up half the time? To why do I like this? First, it's discernment. It's also investigation. It is quite an investigation where you're just getting to understand and giving yourself space to see what you're about and who you are and how you've come about in the way that you have, and understanding all of that. That is a big part of your practice, is just sitting and being like, what's going on in the contents of my mind? What's taking up 80% of its energy? And then looking at it being like, is that in fact true? Is that real? And then we get into the ideas that we've talked about, right? Where we've talked about the 3 principal paths, right? Which are what? What's the first one? Renunciation. What does renunciation mean? What does it mean?
Giving up worldly desires.
Giving up worldly desires.
Giving up the idea that the world comes from anything but your own karma.
Almost. That's like a very advanced renunciator. But yes, most of us, right? Most people that are renunciating that come to this practice are coming from a place of like, something about the way the world's working is not working for me. It's not functioning for me. I don't know what it is, but it's just, I've tried it this way. I did it the way that I've been taught in schools. I did it the way that I was taught by my parents. God bless them. They did the best they can. But I did it the way that I was supposed to climb the corporate ladder, or to get a job, or to get a boyfriend or a girlfriend. And I followed the app the way it was supposed to be done, and it's not working. And so renunciation is coming from a place, right, where you're saying something about the way the world is saying I'm supposed to be functioning is just not making me happier. In fact, I feel more miserable, right? I have the job that I thought that I wanted to have. I got the partner using the app like I'm supposed to, get. And I'm living this life that's supposed to bring me a certain level of happiness. And yet, why on earth am I still not happy? And why is it that I still feel a great amount, if probably not more amount of suffering? So there's a renunciation of saying, maybe this worldly outlook that everyone else is doing is not working for me, and I need to let that go. Maybe there is another method. So we talk about the 3 principal paths, where the first one has to do with renunciation. There has to be some sort of part of you that's compelled or inspired or believes that this worldly way of living is not working for you, and there could be another way of looking at things. Okay. The second one that we've talked about is bodhicitta. What's that? What's bodhicitta? Some weird Sanskrit term. What? A wish for enlightenment. What else? Who wants to build on that? For the sake of all living beings, right? So there's this idea that we say that, that you have to have a sense of wanting to not just save yourself, but you want to save all beings, And I recently had this conversation with a food stylist, like yesterday. Was it yesterday or 2 days ago? She came by our studio to drop by, and it's a friend of Armando's, and she's a mother. And from what I know, I don't think she's a formal Buddhist practitioner at all, but she was talking about parenting and about what it's like being a mom, and was talking about what a sacrifice, like all these sacrifices that you make of being a parent. And I'm in this age bracket right now where like all my friends have kids, and now they're on their second wave of kids, and I hear the complaints and the sacrifices, and I get it. But she had said something in the most interesting way that I've never heard it before, that I'll share with you. She was talking about her partner and her, who are now separated, and they have a 16-year-old son. And she was saying, my ex-partner, for the most part, is supportive, but once a year, he'll always do something that really just drives it home, really ticks me off. And she sits there and just thinks, am I going to react? I have two choices. I can either breathe and let it go, or I can take action. What am I going to do? And the way she chooses what she's going to do is about looking at how it's going to impact her son. If I get pissed off, which she feels very much the right to do it, does that impact her son in some negative way? Or is it going to better serve him if I just don't do anything about it and let it go? Because the issue is between me and him, and I don't need my son to be a part of that equation. Because my behavior of how I behave with my son's father is going to somehow indirectly or directly affect my son. So how am I going to best behave my relationship with this man to make sure that it doesn't influence or impact my son in any negative way? How do I do it in a way where it's the most positive experience for him? And that's the way she behaves. And I just found that, I don't know for you guys, but I've never heard anyone really speak about it that way. I think that there's been, I just remember looking at her thinking, that is the most interesting and profound way of thinking of what a bodhisattva or someone who has a bodhicitta motivation to be. Because most of the times I think we think, how am I going to act ethically, or how do I behave as a good person between me and you? I don't, at least for me, I don't really think about how is my behavior with me and you going to impact everyone else. Like I'm not thinking about that. I'm thinking like you and me, like let's, how's my behavior with you? How am I going to behave with you? Not so much of like, if I behave this way, is it going to impact so and so and so, how does that, I don't think that way. So to start to consider like, oh, my behavior when I go outside and act a certain way in public, right? When I, how does that start to impact the world around me? I think is a really very interesting way to look at that concept of how do you live for not just yourself, but for everyone around you. Yes.
That's the Native American thing, seventh generation.
Yeah.
So it's that culture that's the holistic culture, which this culture isn't.
Can you explain more?
Well, Native Americans, at least the cultures that I hear about, talk about curing. Whenever they have to make a decision, they get the tribe together.
Yeah.
They think about what would this be like 7 generations later, which is about 200 years.
Oh.
And they think within that context. And before the Europeans came, they've been around for 10,000 years, and the ecology supported them abundantly.
That's amazing. Can you imagine? I mean, that's not even like 2 generations or what. That's a, wow.
And so until the Western, Europeans came and conquered and wiped it out, which is now our culture.
Yeah.
It was that very ecological culture.
That's so fascinating. Thank you. That's amazing.
Have you never heard that?
I've never heard that before. I'm going to start reading up on it. I'm so interested in this idea. I mean, I find it interesting because I've never been presented it that way. When we talk about bodhisattva or bodhicitta, it's always been in the context of how are you going to save other people? What are you going to do? Which is important, but also how does your actions impact the people all around you? And most subtle things, like if I really thought about every time I got really pissed off and knowing that that's going to somehow create some kind of imprint on someone else and inflict some sort of anxiety or negative energy, like whatever that may be, maybe I would reconsider every time I get upset, or make these very subtle decisions about, like even email exchanges, like maybe my emails would be a lot more, what would that exchange be, or my text message, like all those things that we think about that feels like it's a interaction or a transaction that you and I have, but it's not you and I are having it. Everyone around it is also going to somehow be impacted by it. So I think that's something that I don't know, really was interesting, of behaving and acting in that way, of what does that do for the people around you. The third principal path is what? And what does that mean? Anyone, what does that mean? What does it mean to have corrected
Have
you?
a perception of emptiness.
Have a perception of emptiness? What else? What does that mean when you say perception of emptiness? I'm sorry. Understanding where your world comes from. And where does your world come from?
Karma.
From your karma? Where else? What did you say?
From here out.
Yeah, it comes from you, right? So this idea that we go around and we make these assumptions, right? That the world is coming at you, like everything is really difficult to you, and everything is coming at you. You are a victim of what's ever happening in your world, rather than this concept that everything that you see and you perceive in the world is coming from you, right? So the example that we had on the first day of class, if you recall, was how many G's are in the room, right? Not just one, right? There's as many perceptions of me as there are as many of you, right? Does that make sense? So then if you go out into the world and you look at people that you see, like your neighbor that, is fabulous or miserable, whatever way that is that in fact valid? Yes, it's valid. It's valid because it's your valid perception. Is it self-existently true, like inherently true? No, of course not. Because that neighbor of yours that drives you crazy, guess what? I bet his mama loves him, and thinks he's the best kid in the world, right? And so these three different principles, are ideas that we have that we bring to the cushion as you start to further practice, and they go deeper. But before you even go to that point, you have to be able to control and understand how to breathe. That is like so, and sit. If you don't have the posture and if you don't have the equipment ready to go, you're not going to be able to do the practice. And so that when you're sitting and you're investigating and you're doing different practices where you will have meditations that start to look at your level of renunciation. You'll have meditations that look at what does it mean to have a heart that's filled with bodhicitta, what it really means to feel like you want to help as many people out there and what that feels like. Or you'll have meditations that have to do with emptiness. Like, what on earth does this mean? What is emptiness? How do I look at my partner and see that he comes from me and doesn't come from himself self-existently? So you have these practices that you can have and go into deeply. But it has to start with your posture and your breath, most importantly. Okay. That's it today, guys. Are there any questions? We're gonna have a meditation at the end, but yes.
I was wondering if we could talk a little bit about what you just touched upon with how this idea that let's if you're interacting with someone or not wanting to affect other people.
Yeah.
Where do you draw the line between a good intention and not wanting to cause negative consequences and people pleasing? And then also for example, we can't control the reactions that people have
Yes.
to us.
Yeah.
And so, for example, there are some things that we do or say that, for example, I don't eat meat. I work in a kitchen, and one time I had a boss ask me to taste something, and I had said, I'm sorry, I don't eat meat, and she freaked out.
Yeah. Yeah.
There was nothing wrong in that situation. It was just that she really didn't like my she was really reacting strongly to that, and so where's that balance?
How does that work? Okay.
Yeah.
So so in Buddhist philosophy, everything comes with intentions. Everything is talked about in the form of intentions. You plant seeds. Every karmic seed that you plant is based on your intention. It's not necessarily your action. So when we talk about, like, the homework assignment that I gave out this past week was once a day you check in and you see one positive thing that you've done and one negative thing and one thing that's going to mitigate the negative thing. That's still something that you guys should do this week. And I think you should maybe consider the 6 perfections. That might be an easy way to go down a list. Does that make sense? I'll go into it right after this. So when we say negative action, positive action, negative action, those don't have to be physical actions. They can be thoughts, because karma is also created by the movement of the mind, which means your thoughts that happen. So everything is based on intentions in Buddhist, in Tibetan Buddhist philosophy. So when you have this intention at the very moment where you're saying, your intention wasn't to piss your boss off, right? Your intention was just to tell her that you have a belief system that doesn't allow you, or doesn't support eating meat. In that moment, that was your intention. What ripened is what we call, what happened when you see her freaking out, that's your karma ripening. It just ripened later down the road. You had planted a seed way back, because every karma seed that you plant also ripens. They just don't happen consecutively. So for instance, in that moment, you had this intention of like, oh, no, I'm sorry, I don't eat meat. She could have acted any which way easily, but it so happened that you had a karma seed that was waiting somewhere because at some point you had probably gotten irrationally pissed off or responded in a certain way in your past that came up now in that very moment that ripened. It was just the right time and right place. The conditions were set, and that's what you see. And that's what happens. Because like you said, you can't control what's out there. You can't control, no, let me rephrase that. You can't control whatever you experience at this very moment and moving forward. You can't really control what happens. What you can control is planting positive seeds to ripen in the future. But what happens today, what happens in the next 15 minutes or the next hour, 2 hours, you can't control that. Those seeds have been planted from you way back. They're just all in queue to ripen at certain points. So as you practice, the reason why we talk so much about purifying your mind isn't for necessarily right now. It's for you to learn to purify it for your future self, so that 5 months, 5 years, 50 years down the road, you're able to start reaping the benefits of having a better mindset and planting positive seeds. So any given moment, the only thing you can do is go in with a positive intention. What happens is really up to your karma. The only thing but the trick is not to react in that moment, because the minute that you react to her nasty attitude and you get nasty, guess what you've just done? What did you do? You just planted another karmic seed for it to happen again. That's the trick, which really sucks, by the way, when you know it, because you're just like, but that's how it works. That's how we talk about things that happen. So when you behave, all you can do is, you do the best you can. Like, I've given this example in the past before, but it's like, how many times have I called my mother and just been like, hi, Mom? And it's a crapshoot, man. Like, some days she is so nice, and other days she is terrible. And I have played with like my tone of voice, time of day, weekday, weekend, night, evening, you know what I mean? It doesn't make a difference. It's like, my karma is my karma, and she's going to behave in however way because I planted those seeds. And the moment I realize that, it doesn't become personal. It becomes something where I'm like, I never want that to happen again. How do I not ensure myself to have that happen again? So it's watching my behavior so that I don't, and there's ways that we can talk about too at some point of how to clean up bad seeds that you have. We have practices in the Buddhist tradition of how to clean up, because that you did something, you're like, oh man, if that ripens, I'm so screwed, and you want to clean that up. There's ways that we can talk about that too. But that's what you do, is that you go in with the best intention. That's all you can do. That's it. And the bad stuff that happens, it happens because that's your karma, and you just hope that you burn through it as quickly as possible. Does that help?
I think my question is more like, less about me having to deal with her yelling at me
Mhm.
and more about like this was another person who got really upset
Yeah.
about like what I would consider like a neutral statement. Like if I said I wore a blue shirt today,
Right.
it's neutral.
But that's because you've also had, so what we would say is that's because you've also had something like that you've done in the past where someone said something and it was probably from their perspective, probably as mundane as what it was for you. It wasn't meant to be offensive, but you took it in a way that was offensive to you. It offended something to you. And it could have been, there's different charges of karma. I mean, and there's a whole course on karma that we'll go into this, um, but you would have to sit and just see if there's anything that you can even recall where you're like, I might have offended, you were maybe offended by somebody who said something to you where, it might have been like, hey, I just need to make sure I leave today at X time. And that offended you because you thought that meant that they didn't care to be there for you. I don't know. I'm just making that up, but that's why you would see something like that. Somewhere in your past, there was a moment in time where you also did something like your boss. It may not have been to the extreme because karma also grows like a plant. If you put if I were to plant a seed that's this big, it could also grow into a maple tree, right? So karma does grow over time. So it could have been something that was much less extreme that grew, but that's why you'd be experiencing that. That's how we would talk about it.
But what do you do about the fact that your action upset somebody?
It didn't upset them. Your action didn't upset them. Your action is separate to their action. It just looks as if it was one after the other because she could have just been happy or not. It's like my mom. I call her and I say hello and she's pissed or happy. My action didn't upset her. It just looked like it was that. Does that make sense? It's the sequence of events that makes it look like that, but it's not that, because you could probably go back to that woman 6 days later and say the same thing. She's like, oh, okay. Totally not related, but it looks related. It really messes with you. It's something where I have to be like, and I have to think, and I'm like, wait, that's not how it works in this philosophy. And so I have to rework and be like, how do I readdress this? It's a very interesting practice. Yes.
So is there anything that's not dictated by the laws of karma? Like the people that were attacked in New York today, is that because they did something?
That's something with their karma, sure. And it's a collective karma that we have, that we are in a city where we are also part of it. Yeah. Yeah. And, and it goes into different things, it could be seeds that are in your own, in your current lifetime. They could be seeds that were in a past lifetime. The deeper your meditations go, you will see different things that will come to you. They say when you have the direct perception of emptiness, you will actually see past lives, future lives. But it's not uncommon. Even if you just took a minute and you sat with something that's happened to you and you're like, someone was behaving a certain way, and freaking out. Most of us could, if you're pretty self-aware, you could probably sit and be like, oh yeah, I remember when I did something like that. I have so many moments where I think about things and, like I have now people on my team, and they'll do something and I'm their boss. And I'm like thinking, I have these very, very vivid memories of how my bosses said certain things to me that I did not understand when I was, first in New York in my 20s. And now I'm seeing people that I'm employing behave a certain way. And I'm like, why are you this way? And I'm like, oh, of course, only, but it doesn't annoy other people on the team. It just annoys me. It's my karma. Like, that's what I have. It's not self-existently annoying. Like there might be other people in your kitchen that could have seen that and they felt like your boss had every right to behave that way because you were actually not participating in doing your job. And your job is to taste the food. It's not about your philosophy and your religion or whatever, you know what I mean? So it just depends. Like it's just everyone's own karma of how that ripens and how that feels to you and is perceived to you. Yes.
My question is a little bit different.
Okay.
So
I'll try to answer.
I'm wondering about the eyes.
Oh yeah.
In the 8-point posture.
Great.
Because I have to be more aware of it now, but I realize that a lot of times when I meditate or like also with specific certain types of meditation, like if I'm rejoicing or if I'm taking like what's it called again? Like if I'm imagining myself as a certain being. My gaze actually shifts
to your third eye.
So why do we have to?
You don't have to. I mean, there might be certain practices where you do actually visualize your third eye.
It's nothing that I've learned.
Oh, yeah. You just notice that that's where your focus is, or your gaze is there.
My gaze. I guess I'm just wondering, like, in our lineage, why is it that it's 45 degrees down?
I don't know. I have no answer to that. Yes?
Is it just like a starting place?
I don't, you know what? I've never heard of it as a starting place. And I don't know if there's a specific reason why it happens to be right there. When I say right there, like a 45 degrees, 6 inches away from it's just what it's been in the scriptures. I'm just thinking right now it's interesting when you meditate though, because your eyes can rest at a certain place, but it's almost like but your mind can be elsewhere. That makes sense. Like I could be, and we kind of did this meditation practice on course 2, and we'll do it again. It's actually interesting where you start to see the difference of the space of your mind and then your awareness as 2 different things. Yeah, you have like, right. So there's ways that you could have, like I could be focusing my eyes softly on really nothing. It's just kind of a soft focus and still be looking at the ground right in front of me and yet have a focus of my third eye. I could do that, right? You could do that. You could be looking at me and your mind can actually be in like the Bahamas right now. Right? Do that. You can do it, right? Right? You did it. And it's just as real, right? So
I'm only asking because I know that like in the more advanced practices, it certainly correlates to like what you learn in the beginning practices, right? Like the prelim setups, something else, the way that you sit might have certain indications. So I guess I was just wondering.
Yeah, if the third eye has something. Or
I'm sure third eye has something, but just the reason why you might want to start out and set a firm foundation with your gaze in a certain way.
Yeah.
And then like, am I going too far in one direction? Maybe I want to come back before I've done too many years of moving my eyes around. And
I mean, most of the times when you're meditating, I've never heard of a meditation where you're really moving your mind. Well, unless you're doing like a walking meditation. But even with walking meditations, you're not looking around. So there really aren't meditations that I know of. And I'd be curious to know if you know of any, but your eyes technically aren't ever moving around. They're always in a certain place to keep it steady. And your mind can be moving in different places of your body. And you can have different visualizations, but your gaze is always in the same spot, whether they're closed or open.
So there's no instruction.
Yeah, not that I know of. Yeah. I mean, I suspect that, you know, all these different postures that you're thinking about or that they're talking about is really to get your body out of the way so that you can focus on the space of your mind. And so I would think that the gaze is really because it's a natural place for it to be. It can rest there for a long period of time. I mean, you know, you get to advanced meditators that are doing 3-hour sits, you know. So even like I've had conversations about posture, like, you know, is it the traditional posture? And that is hard to hold for 3 hours. And so you'll start to see people, you know, so it's really about just getting your body out of the way. And I suspect that really the gaze has to do with the fact that it's an easy, restful place where your body just naturally falls with your eyes. Okay, cool. We have, oh yes, one more question I'll take.
It wasn't a question. It was,
Okay.
something I was thinking about regarding your question. I realize that sometimes, for example, if I do something out of fear of not upsetting somebody, if I'm in the moment aware of that, the fact that I'm actually doing it out of fear, I actually can choose to continue to do that because I'm afraid of upsetting them, or actually do whatever I'm still doing, but so that um, I don't, so that I don't see them suffer. So the outcome is the same thing. I'm still doing the same thing that I would be doing, but instead of doing that thing, being like, oh, I'm afraid of them being, pissed off or whatever it is, I'm actually like, you know what? I'm going to change that intention of doing it out of fear or to something like I'm doing it because I actually don't want to see them get upset and suffer.
Right.
Versus it being about me.
Yeah.
Protecting my
Well, that's a
fear.
different, right, and those are two different karmic seeds that you have. I mean, they're mixed bags, but yeah, sure. Yeah.
Could that also be like trying not to get the reaction, so like you're kind of like not wanting
You could.
karmic.
You could, but the thing is that, once you start to play with this idea and really examine it, the fact is that you're still looking at it like it's a correlation of your action. The fact is that whether you go in with the intention of wanting to avoid upsetting someone or doing it to upset someone doesn't really make a difference, because that action is already waiting to be its own thing on its own. Does that make sense? So your action, and I actually would be you guys should experiment with it this week and see how it goes. Like, play with it and have moments where you see like, okay, I'm going to do everything I can to avoid so and so getting upset, and see if it works. And then do it another day and be like, you know what, I'm going to do everything to see if I can upset them and see what happens. I'm serious. It's very interesting to watch, because if you actually do it more regularly, you'll realize, just like my experiment with my mom, it doesn't make a difference. Like, I can go in with the intention of wanting to make her really happy, or go in the intention with not wanting to make her happy and upset her. It's the same outcome.
The outcome in the present is the same, but what
Yeah.
we do in the future.
Totally, very different. Yeah. So to try to act a certain way, to think that that's going to control the outcome, that's not looking at, or not understanding how what we're calling, right, worldview, how that works. But to consider, while you're doing that action, I mean, what Hannibal's talking about is your intention of, my action will be the same, right, but my motivation is going to be shifted. That's worth looking at for sure. Yeah. Does that make sense? Yes.
Just saying, I've been practicing that for the last several years.
Yeah.
Getting more intense every
Yeah.
month. To get more. In the last couple months or something, those people are super polite around me.
Yeah.
A lot more than they've ever been.
Yeah.
So something's definitely
Something changes. It does. That's a very good point. It does. It's very interesting to watch, because your worlds will start to change the more you start to be consistent with your practice. And it's true. The opportunities seem to be a little different. The moments that feel like, I mean, I find that when people are polite out of the blue, it's just so magical in the city when it happens. You're like, wow, that's amazing. It's like a miracle, and so it feels like more miracles are happening. And the cleaner your mind, believe it or not, I mean, I really do believe this, the cleaner the situations that you're going to be in will become. They just are. And they don't ruffle your feathers like the way they used to. You don't get as emotionally bogged down. And the big thing is that you don't take a lot of stuff that you're dealing with personally, because it's not personal. And that's a big thing. You think it's personal to you. Like, you think your boss is like personally telling you that you suck because you didn't eat meat, It's not like that at all. You realize how actually impersonal it is in a way. And yet so personal, because you're accountable for that behavior that you're seeing. And so in a lot of ways, it starts to empower you to realize that, yeah, okay, your life isn't the greatest right now, but guess what? You can actually change it, which is really cool. I mean, you actually can change the entire landscape of your life, you know, and I mean, it's a experiment that I've been doing for now, I don't know, like 10 years, you know, where I kind of was interested with this idea, and now I have, you know, a company that I've created based on Buddhist principles. And it's strange because we're still around and making money and helping people, and it's working, you know, and it continues to. And I'm curious to see, does it, you know, and it just keeps perpetuating into other things all the time. And and so it's fascinating to see how much the process and the ideas that you learn in these classes and what meditation does, and how it starts to free up a lot of different portals that you didn't even know existed. It's like you've been bottlenecking and choking through one channel and trying to like make it flow. And the fact is, there's so many different other channels that you have, and you didn't even realize that you have access to those, because you're just bottlenecking on one and thinking that's the only way. It's not the only way. So it does really make a big difference, and your worlds start to change. And suddenly your neighbor next door, who is just always really loud, is coming by and, you know, bringing you like holiday gifts. And you're like, wow, that's insane. This is New York. Who does that? Right? Okay. All right. We're going to wrap up and do one more sit. Thinking about the 8-point postures that we went through. So thinking about your seat, think about your legs, think about your back and your shoulders, of how you're seated, where your arms are placed. Like, really be intentional about where everything is. Don't just kind of flop down there and think it's going to figure itself out. Check out where your chin is and your head. Is it tilted forward? Like, play with it. Like, try what it's like when you tilt it too much and when you tilt it back, and get it just right. Play with the weight of your body, moving it forward. See what that feels like, and moving it back. And then kind of rock and find that sweet spot for yourself. And then move your shoulders back, nice and straight. I'm going to get a little bit more detailed, but lift your diaphragm off of your stomach. Don't crunch on your tummy. Give it some room. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So we're going to do a 7-minute sit. I'm going to tack on the 2 minutes. And you're going to do what you just did before. And you're just going to relax. Okay. And if you have certain things that will be coming up, that you know that are coming up, that's great. Wait for it. And when you see it and you feel it and it occupies your mind or your body, use your breath and let it go. And start to get a sense of what it's like to breathe in your body and be completely still and just be. How was that? Out of juice? Okay. We're going to juice. We're going to close with closing. Yes.
The biggest thing I noticed is how still the room
Yeah. It was better this time, wasn't it? Yeah.
that shared stillness.
Yeah. It was much better this time compared to the first one. It felt like you guys were, it felt less cluttered. Okay. Very nice. Here we go. I just want you to sit for a second and rejoice in being in class tonight, taking the time and making it a priority to learn how to meditate, whether it's just for you or for you and everyone around you. Take a moment and commend yourself for being here on Halloween. And then think of one person out there in the world that you know, wishing nothing but happiness and joy, wishing that they get everything that they want, to be free from suffering, and dedicating all your effort of being here tonight, dedicating it towards them. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Really nice. Okay, so this week's homework, which I'll email everyone, is going to be 7 days. I mean, 7 days, of course, 7 days. 7 minutes, 7 minutes, 7 days. 7-minute practice every day. Doing exactly what we did in class, where we're just relaxing and breathing. I promise the meditations will get sexier, but this will be the next week of just, I want you to sit and be still and feel your body. The other practice that we had last week was to write one positive, one negative thing, and one thing to mitigate the negative thing. What I'd like for you to do this week is actually use the 6 perfections for that. I'll email everyone the 6 perfection, but there's basically 6 perfections that we talked about in last class, or maybe it was the first class. But what I'd like for you to do is take one perfection per day and just go through the list and do what you know. So the first one, be patience. And so you go through tomorrow, anytime during the day, and you just take a moment and you say, okay, one positive way I was showing and exhibiting patience. You know, I was on hold for 30 minutes with Bank of America. Yes, and I didn't complain. Amazing. Plus, negative, you know, one negative thing where I didn't show my patience. I was really upset once the person at Bank of America got on the phone and didn't give me what I wanted. Okay, not so great. One way that I'm going to mitigate that. Okay, I got upset because I didn't get what I wanted. So I'm going to, next time in the next 24 hours, undoubtedly someone's going to want something that I don't want to give them. I'm going to give it to them, you know. Someone's going to come on my desk and say, I really need X, Y, and Z by this time, and I want to push back, but I'm not going to push back and say, sure, of course, no problem. Okay, does that make sense? So you're going to go through that list, one per day. I'll write a little description of each perfection, but the idea is that you're just checking in. You're just checking in yourself and seeing how you're doing during that day. Okay? So, good? Okay, awesome. Thank you, everyone. Have a very good evening. Please be safe.